This tutorial is still from April the 7th of 2018. I'm going to make a little short video here to show you how to start with a shape such as an ellipse and making that mandala. You made the mandala from an entire image, which is fine, but you can also create mandalas by starting with part of an image, a shape. And I'm going to show you how to do this as an ellipse. So for this tutorial, I'm going to go into the File, Open, and I'm going to go back over to my April folder. And in that, I have Creative Image Examples, my folder. I'm going to open it, and you'll find Tibbetts 98 wires. This is also the image that we're going to do a kaleidoscope on in a minute, but we're going to use it for this little exercise. So click. Well, I need to be sure that my format on these is set to be camera raw. If I go back and say the format of this image is truly a JPEG, it will open as a JPEG directly in the editor workspace. All right, this is an example of how you get to use an image which by itself was kind of useless. I was diving on the wreck of Tibbetts, which was an artificial reef, a wreck that was put down off the coast of Cayman Brac, and it's been there since the late 80s. And of course, it's now has a lot of marine life that lives on it. This was not done recently. This was done quite within maybe 5 years of its being put down. And I took this picture because there is a nice little sea urchin here. Can you see him? He took up life on one of the old wires that's on this ship. I can tell you that if you went down on this ship now, you'd find a lot more marine life on it. But at that time, it was mostly the wreck of the old ship. And incidentally, this ship was purchased by the Cayman government from Cuba. And it was a Russian frigate. And it was actually a Russian battleship, but it was the design that we call frigates, so it doesn't look like a battleship. And they took it and they carefully got all of the material removed that would be dangerous, all the insulation, anything that would not be good to put down for the marine life to deal with. And then, after it got down, it went through years becoming a true wreck. First time I dove on it, it was just like a ship that had just been put on the bottom. It sits at about 90 feet of water at the deepest point. And each year, for a number of years, I went back and watched it gradually become a wreck. And the biggest change occurred one year when there was a hurricane, and the hurricane got to it, and there was a big radar tower on top of the ship, and it broke off, and the radar tower now sits on the sand. And so little by little, things that end up in the ocean do become true wrecks, as we would expect. So I want to make a piece that will have some interesting character, some graphic character to it. I don't have a lot of color, you realize. So I'm going to try to use a piece that will include my lovely guy here. And I think if I could make my ellipse include part of the white up here, I would have a little more contrast in the picture because that's the brightest part of the image. And of course, if it has any of these curved hoses, they'll be interesting when they're put into a mandala. So the trick to learn here is how do you create an ellipse out of an image so that that ellipse is exactly where you want it. So this is a good way to learn how to use this tool. Go over to your rectangular marquee tool, and in the group, you'll find the elliptical marquee. So you grab that tool, and I don't know for sure where to draw this. So I'm going to benefit from the fact that I must not lift this marquee tool up once I start till I'm satisfied with the results. But when I want to move the entire selection, I hold down the space bar, which turns this tool into a hand, and I can move the ellipse somewhere else until I get it just where I want it. So I'm going to start up somewhere up here so that I know I can include a little bit of this white, and I know I'm far enough to the left that it will pick up my sea urchin. So up here, I'm starting, and I'm going to hold the mouse button down and drag this ellipse. And I may have made a good choice to start, but I want you to know that you aren't stuck with that location. If you take your free hand, hold the space bar down, you can move this anywhere you want on the screen. And that's important when you're cutting out shapes like an ellipse. I do not lift my right hand on the tool, but I lift my left hand off the space bar, and now I can change the shape of the ellipse if I want to, but it won't move its location. So once I think I have enough stuff in here to be interesting, like I have that white bar and I have my sea urchin, but I think I'd like it to go higher up so it has more of the white. So I take my space bar back and drag it up a little bit so it's a little higher, because I have plenty of room around my sea urchin. When I'm satisfied, I lift the tool hand, which in my case is the right hand, and I set that the way it's going to be used. Now, if I'm dissatisfied, I simply delete the selection and start over. But having done it before, I knew what I wanted to use. So I have done this, and I would like, well, I forgot to make a copy of the background. I bet I could still do that. Let's see if I can go over and make a copy of the background. Yes, I did. And when I made a copy of the background, guess what I got? I got my ellipse like I wanted it on a new layer. So my poor memory forgot this is the right way to do it. Make your selection on the background. Then copy the background and your selection will be on a new layer. Okay? And once I have it on the new layer, I would want to turn, if I'm going to make a mandala, remember, what do I need to do? I need to make the background black. So I would click on the background and I would go to Edit, Fill, and I would be sure that I'm choosing black as the color. And now I'm like I was with the flower, but this time I'm rotating a shape. Can you visualize in your mind what it might be like? Well, if you get my PDF file and look at it, I've shown you what a 60-degree mandala looks like when it's based out on this. And of course, every time you make your ellipse cut differently, your mandala will be different. So if you make one and you look at it and say, I'd rather have this in the image, then all you do is start again and make your elliptical cut a little bit differently. So I'm not going to take the time to repeat the mandala because I have a separate one to do this. But all you would do right here is copy the image layer and do the free transform, and you would have to decide what your new center point is going to be. And I can tell you, in mine, I came up near this white piece and I put the center, but you've got to be sure you can determine it and find it. Like, for example, there is a little dot here in the middle of this white wire. That might be a good spot. Or what about where these come together at the edge here? The reason for going to the edge is you get a larger image out of it, and less of the image is overlapped. If I make a center that's just a little bit away from the other one, I will have a lot of overlap of the image. And I wanted quite a unique pattern. So I wanted a new center point or pivot point near the edge. But you would realize that we don't have a neat bud any longer. So you have to be sure you know where it is. And so you choose a place near the edge that's easy to exactly duplicate, so that when you're done, you have a perfect image and it doesn't have a messy center because that new pivot point was not always the same. So that's how you start if you want to work with an ellipse.